Hello and welcome to the AI Digest. My name is Joaquin Melara and I'm the host. With me today is Evangelia Yfantidi. Evangelia, it's a pleasure to have you. How are you doing
Thanks
today?
for having me. I am pretty great. It's Saturday. I went on my weekly long walk with my dog, so it's a great day.
Wonderful. And you are especially lucky because you are based out of Greece, right?
Yes, I am living in Greece, in a city called Piraeus. It's basically near Athens, so good weather almost all year round.
I'm going to have to go and visit and impose myself on your Greek hospitality.
Well, you're welcome. It wouldn't be Greek hospitality if you had to impose yourself.
um, okay. We'll talk about that when I impose on another time. But
Okay.
let's talk a little bit about your background. You're a speech analyst for Vodafone Business.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about what a speech analyst is, what they do?
Speech analytics, like text analytics, is generally speaking used by companies when they want to assess mostly behavioral data. So it's when you want to move past the typical or traditional KPIs and metrics that most business analysts and data analysts can tell you. For example, when you're analyzing calls of customers, some typical data could be the duration of the call or how long the employee was talking versus the customer, or if there was silence time, how long was that silence time. These are pretty standard data to describe the structure of a call, and you really don't need specifically speech analytics for that. But if you add the kind of themes people were discussing during a call and how they were discussing them, and combine it with all these more traditional KPIs and metrics, you can actually start seeing things about where you might want to improve your operations, where you might think you have improved your operations, but you haven't. Perhaps find training gaps or a lot of other issues that can be more directly influenced and controlled and resolved by the business,
Hmm.
because you can't really solve everything and satisfy everyone, but you can do some damage control. Let's say it this way.
Okay. And in the context of the organization you work for, Vodafone Business is a telecommunications platform.
Yeah, it's a telecommunications provider across Europe. Like there's the Vodafone Group, and then you have like Vodafone Germany, um, I know Poland, Greece, um, Spain. Though I'm not sure Spain is still part of the Vodafone Group because some kind of merger happened over there.
Hmm.
But basically, yeah, it's operating across different European countries.
Okay. Prior to joining Vodafone as a speech analyst, you had a course of study, an academic study in osteoarchaeology. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about what that course of study is, and sort of your academic journey, what led you to that?
Well, yeah, my academic journey was completely irrelevant to my current job. To put it into perspective, it's like history, archaeology, and anthropology a little bit. So I was basically fascinated by the idea of studying bones. um, my master's degree was more about it was more like general. So we went through human bones and non-human bones.
Hmm.
And eventually I wanted to study about horses and the rise of workhorse type of horses across the Silk Route.
Hmm. When you say the Silk routes, you mean Asia to Europe,
Yeah,
right?
like China, all the way to Eastern Mediterranean.
Okay. Trading silk, opium, and anything in between, right?
Uh, I Yeah, I'm not sure when the opium trade happened. I mean, I'm pretty sure people took drugs throughout the centuries. Yeah. But I was looking more into artifacts like silk, gold,
Hmm.
and horses.
Okay. And yeah, you also mentioned before we started recording the that one of the components that you also evaluated was looking at historical records and historical artifacts showcasing how things evolved over time too, right?
um, yes, because I since I was interested to see how war horses developed as a specific type of horse, it was necessary to be able to find, let's say, data points that would give me clues regarding both the physical changes, like why a horse is a war horse and not, I don't know, your standard horse that um, a farmer could use, for example. And obviously, then I had to also find its commercial value. And there you have lots of fluctuations, especially when you have a kind of trade that is one good for another good. So, for example, if people wanted to exchange silk for horses, um, which areas and which periods sustained this particular type of trade? And what can that tell us? And when did it change and why did it change? Perhaps, and this is something that did happen, the quality of silk in a certain area that I'm going to give some completely random dates. Let's say 700 AD was the best silk you could get. It was not the same thing 50 or 100 years later. So in that case, you couldn't any longer use that silk to buy a workhorse
Mm,
or a very good quality horse. And that could be at least one of the reasons that would impact a local economy or a local trading center. Because we're talking about material goods that were actually really uh, expensive for the time period we're talking about.
mm, that makes sense. Okay. And yeah, what did that academic background and studying bones, osteoarchaeology help you sort of understand about people, about technology, about just changes over time, behavior patterns?
Yeah, I think uh, like there were two major benefits here. One is pattern recognition because speech analytics and by extension data analytics and business analytics relies heavily on identifying patterns within your data, whatever.
I was
And
gonna say,
yeah, it's very difficult when English is not your first language to
does it
decide
matter?
which
Data
one you're gonna keep use and then keep using it.
does it matter which one it is? Data?
Personally, to me, no, but
I think
I don't
I
want anyone to feel bad or offended because I keep switching between the two.
Just use both. Use hyphen data. Anyways, you were saying?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, whether we're talking about something specific as speech analytics or business analytics or data analytics, they rely on this pattern identification, pattern recognition within your data slash data. The same way it's necessary when you are an archaeologist or a historian, or even people from other social science fields, like a sociologist or a psychologist. Like you have to be able to understand and identify the patterns in people behavior, in preferences, um, or negative sentiments associated with certain events.
Hmm.
I mean,
Okay.
it's basically about cultivating and perhaps not an ability, but a skill to um, recognize trends. Either those are communication trends, like a negative trend in your, for example, mobile product uh, themes. It might be something you want to look into.
Hmm. I mean, individual behavior sometimes gives you a hint of what's going on in aggregate groups of people, right?
Sometimes you can take like a small sample or even an individual um, weird, let's say, behavior, and then find a bigger trend behind it. Other times it could be an outlier, something that went perhaps horribly wrong in a certain case, in which case you probably want to do some kind of a root cause analysis and see why this happened. And if the reasons that allowed this one specific but absolutely horribly negative event to happen are under your, let's say, control, because sometimes you might have certain gaps in your operations,
Mm-hmm.
and the only reason you don't have more unfortunate events is that it's luck. It just happened.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, most most small
Think of it
medium
like
sized.
stairs, like you have some steps that are really poorly constructed, and the only reason you had one horrible accident and not more than one is just bad luck.
Hmm.
But once you have that one bad accident and you realize that the root cause for it is that you have a few steps that are problematic, you probably need to go and fix them. Otherwise, you're kind of teasing your luck, and you're like, yeah, okay, let me see if I can do that again. If more people can get horribly, I don't know, hurt and break their bones and everything.
Hmm. Yeah, sometimes it's a matter of volume, right? Sometimes these patterns don't emerge until you have a certain amount of customer interactions or a certain number of customers randomly engage in the process that you've outlined. Statistically, you said maybe one out of a million may encounter that bad step and be hurt, but anytime that happens is an opportunity for you to fortify your business procedures, right?
Yeah. And obviously, there are other times where you can just observe trends and realize that, oh, okay, we need a little bit more training there because we can't um, solve everything and have the absolutely perfect result, but we can actually guide our people to handle certain situations more efficiently. So let's say, for example, You have customers who complain about their bills. They saw their monthly balance, and they saw that it was something like, instead of 20 euros, $20, it was 40. And they call, they contact you and ask what has happened. That's going to take some troubleshooting, and then you have to explain it to them. How long do you think that's going to take? 5, 10, 15 minutes. But
Mhm.
if I have customers who have called for that specific intent, and they're talking for 30 or 40 minutes, either I have some kind of a problem there, like maybe some people are trying to make payments, they don't come through, and they suddenly see that they are sort of living month after month unpaid without them actually doing that. It's my systems that have some kind of a problem,
Mhm.
or my agents need more training to locate the problem faster, or I have customers who they have this weird belief, and it has happened to me, like that somehow this bill that they left unpaid will be forgotten somehow, you know, and they kind of like play dumb, I would say. So, like, no, I don't understand what you're telling me. So, you might want to, again, train your agents to use a language that's going to help you convey the methods that's not going to happen. Like, you know,
I think
you,
yeah, I think that's a very interesting piece of insight that you're providing. Customer service is a monitor, a pulse check on the breakdowns, or the process breakdown of the socio-technical system that you're a part of. Whether it's something wrong with the process, or your agents are not properly trained, or you're not radiating information early enough to educate your clients or customers how to engage with the system, or there's a technical problem outside of the control or maintenance of the organization at the time, and somebody trips on a faulty step.
yes. And, like essentially with speech analytics, you can actually start diving into all these different types of topics and uncover more insights um, than when you can't really examine what people are talking about. What are they saying? Is it about their service? Do they have a technical issue? Do they have um, like a billing matter issue? Is it
Mm.
something that they have asked for, something like for a new line, and it's taking too long? They have asked to relocate, and it's not been properly done. So it's not about like so much individual case, like okay, Eva cannot do, like she wants to relocate and she can't do it. It's more about what's wrong with our process. Okay, who needs to do what in order to help things move faster and smoother.
I think one interesting component of speech that isn't readily available or readily detectable in text is a sentiment. I think you really have to analyze text to get a feeling for how this person may have felt, but it doesn't necessarily translate into a sensory experience for whoever is measuring that. But speech, I think, you can convey if somebody's upset or somebody is happy, or some sort of sentiment out of the way that they speak, right?
um, you can actually run a very decent sentiment analysis using text data only, be it things like tweets or social media posts or transcriptions of calls. And you can also add another layer if you are handling speech data, which will be um, the tone of someone's voice or how fast they speak. And I mean, of course, in that case, you have to take into consideration um, what we could call perhaps a cultural framework,
Mm.
because some cultures speak louder when people are upset, other cultures speak faster, and so on and so forth. There are obviously individual differences, but there is a certain, let's say, central tendency because of the culture we are brought up into. Um, I would say if you want to go beyond the typical positive, negative, neutral categorization of sentiment, and there are some ways to do that, obviously. However, it's really very complicated and I'm not sure it is necessarily worth it. Perhaps if you want to look something really very specific, like the way sarcasm or irony might correlate with negative feelings.
Mm. Yeah, those are harder to detect just from speech or from text. You're right.
Yeah, so maybe if you want to focus on something really very specific, uh, but I'm not sure again if something as specific in the context of customer service is necessary.
Y-
You know,
you said length of an engagement is an indicator of, okay, why is this taking 40 minutes to resolve? Is there a big problem here? What's the miscommunication or what's the communication breakdown happening here? If it was a request and it's customer service, it should be expedited in a matter of minutes, no?
I mean, yes, if you think about it, like, I don't know, have you recently called any, I don't know, your telecommunication provider or some company that you wanted to call for some problem you had to be resolved?
Yes,
As
I
a
mean,
customer, do you want to talk more than 10 or 15 minutes?
no, solve my problem.
And
Let's resolve the situation so that we can both move on with our lives.
I think that's a pretty common sentiment. It's not that the majority of people want to spend their entire morning talking to an agent about some problem they have. So there's clearly something going on over there.
Hmm.
Um, and when you start going into, like, because generally speaking, the duration of the call tends to be um, kind of heavily skewed. Like, yes, most of the calls are actually pretty short. So when you start moving like to longer calls past the 15-20 minute mark, they are considerably fewer.
They're outliers. Yeah.
They are outliers. And the way that they correlate with other metrics as well as this sort of behavioral data that we're talking about, the kind of categories like the themes, the reasons why people have called you, and what kind of sentiment they are expressing. It's also really interesting because it can it can provide more, how should I say this politely, it's a different image than the majority of the calls that are short and to the point.
Hmm.
So it's generally speaking where you're going to find a lot of your problems. Not all of your problems, and not necessarily the ones that you can resolve fast.
So, in relation to your background in osteoarchaeology, you examine artifacts, you examine bones, you examined historical records to piece together a story, to piece together the context of where you can rationalize what's going on with a certain group of people and what they're doing, how they're doing, any problems they're encountering. When we talk about the context of your current job, what are some of the business data or some of the artifacts that you examine to piece together the present state and recommendations on how to fix and prioritize those problems?
Well, you're gonna have to start from your typical metrics and KPIs like average handling times or um, customer satisfaction scores and things like that. Things that you don't really necessarily need speech or text analytics. You already have them. And then you have to create another semantic layer of information, which is, um, I would say, the kind of service demands people have, because that's how you can actually understand their customer journey uh, beyond the point of, oh, okay, I am thinking about buying a product. I'm engaging into a conversation about buying that product. I bought that product, and so on and so forth. Like you follow the customer journey from beginning to the end. The layer of customer behavior is how happy they are with what they have, how they express that, and how can we um, influence that? Because sometimes um, it's what I said, like sometimes you might need to train people to think different. Sometimes you might want to tell them to be more empathetic. Other times you might want to tell them to be more firm, because having a very empathetic and passive language, in certain cases, it can actually be detrimental to the business.
Mm,
Because, like some customers might have unreasonable demands,
hmm,
or maybe something bad happened, but they are the kind of people who don't understand that, okay, like we made a mistake, that's our bad, we're really sorry about that, what can we do to fix it? And then they keep demanding and demanding things.
mhm.
So in that case, it's impossible for any business to just start giving things and services and products just to appease a person who is probably at that point not really dissatisfied. you
They're
know
just hijacking
yeah,
uh, the
so
grace
you
of
have
yeah.
to help your people negotiate that situation better. If it is a problem for your business and you can locate that with speech and text analytics, you can make this kind of suggestions how you can train people, because there are certainly certain roles, um, either in customer service or complaint management or technical service roles, that they will have to handle this kind of pressure. And it's making the life of everyone difficult when you're not helping these people um, think outside what is for them in their context a box, because you can see outside that box, but they don't necessarily have the same viewpoint since they are inside that situation.
Mm. So we start out with a baseline of defining what success looks like, right? And then collecting data to sort of find an average semblance of what that success looks like in some sort of ratio, a KPI, right? Um,
Yeah, more or less. I mean, you have to have a sense of what is, broadly speaking, normal. And
Mhm.
I think this is a pretty logical perspective, both for the company as well as for the customer,
Mhm.
because a company doesn't want to talk to one customer throughout the day. And most customers don't really want to call a company or contact a company and just stay there on the phone and send an email after another email and so on and so forth.
Mm.
Everyone wants to have smooth and efficient flow. You get a request, there's some kind of troubleshooting, what has happened, why it has happened, and then it's resolved and move on to the next.
Mhm.
If a bottleneck happens or if there is a problem and something gets stuck, what do we do then?
You have to elevate the system's bottleneck to the next bottleneck. You have to fundamentally change some aspect of the education, knowledge, skills, capabilities of the agents in that system.
I mean, this is what you can do because you can't really directly influence the people who are your customers to behave the way you want them to behave or tell
Right.
you the things that you want them to tell you. I
Right.
mean, think of it if you are in the supermarket and you're waiting on the line to pay for your stuff. If there is a bottleneck and suddenly one of the what's the word? Uh, where we go and pay for the stuff we have.
Were you what?
Uh,
Sorry?
when we're in the supermarket, I'm sorry, my brain.
Grab a ticket? You mean when you're in the deli, the meat section, and you want to
Yeah,
get a
like, and you take your stuff and then you go to pay for them, and there
oh,
is a
cashier.
bottleneck. Yeah, thank you. And I've been a cashier actually. I forgot that. Okay, but let's say that you have this situation, like you have two cashiers, and one of them is stuck. Like the line is practically endless, and the other one is just empty.
Mhm.
What are you gonna do? I mean, for some reason, you have a bottleneck there. Something has obviously gone wrong, and you have to do the resolution's pretty simple. You just tell everyone, okay, go to number two. Like it's empty. Just do it. Go there. But that's the situation. Like that's the problem, and that's how you're gonna solve it.
And it's and
There is an average, something that tells you that this is normal. So if you have two cashiers open and they are um, just, you know, helping out with the process, and everyone pays for their stuff, and they just leave their supermarket or the deli, it's fine. That's good. That's
mhm.
normal, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Within the
But
assumption that there are multiple cashiers and that two happen to be available that day, um, and people just need to hear, "Hey, we're open. Come over here so that we can cut that in half." That makes sense. But there are other problems when there's only one cashier, period, or there's a fundamentally bigger concerns in the organization that they can only, handle a certain amount of customers at a time and not fulfill the demand, right?
this is a much bigger issue because if you have more cashiers but they are not open, I mean, okay, that's pretty easy to resolve.
Hmm.
But if you don't even have the infrastructure for that, that's a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, if you troubleshoot and you realize that, oh, okay, you know what, this is not something that happened only once. We just had more customers for a couple of days, and that's why we had this kind of unpleasant situation. But it's something that's just happening and keeps happening, then you need to be able to describe this problem because your business will have to do something about it. Maybe it's time to upgrade your infrastructure and have more cashiers because you have more people now. So you have to add this to your planning. Otherwise, you risk losing all that extra money, basically, all that profit that the extra customers bring.
How would you go about conducting a root cause analysis in that sort of scenario?
Um, a
So
root
you
cause analysis is basically the same thing. You just need to ask why something has happened and keep asking why until you get down to a reason that cannot be split or broken down to more reasons.
hmm,
I mean, if you look at the situation with the supermarket, you might start asking why there were so many people that were waiting for so long on like Monday afternoon. Uh, and someone might say, okay, but this also happened last Wednesday and throughout the previous week as well. We had the same problem. Why did we have the same problem? If you just start asking why over and over again, eventually you will get down to a reason that you can't break it down any further. And if that answer in our example, it was that you have only one cashier.
mhm, hmm.
It sounds simple, but it might involve, and usually does involve, a lot of analysis to get there. Now, the analysis is another question. I mean, it could be a huge project or it can be a pretty straightforward, but it depends.
So let's change topics. One of the things that we discussed also in a few conversations before starting this recording is that behavior of people doesn't change. Like you can create a system, they're going to behave how they behave, and we can't expect them to behave differently against the system, but we can change the system to adapt to their behavior. And we also mentioned that people have not fundamentally changed for a very long time. Psychologically, physically, we're still the same kind of people that we were in the Ice Age in nomadic tribes looking to kill a woolly mammoth, right?
Um, my instinct and science pretty much agree with that.
So
I mean,
we're cave people with modern phones. Is that what it is? We're cave people with smartphones.
yeah, we are cave people with smartphones. We are cave people. I mean, um, we shouldn't underestimate the layers of information that civilization has offered us. It's what I tell sometimes people about the many questions regarding national identities and whether those change through the centuries.
Hmm.
Um, you can't really expect, or actually, you can't really make the argument that the national identity has changed because people in like 500 BC did not have all the information, all the data that we have now. There is a great deposition of information that happens as the centuries go by, and we benefit from that. I am not a huge fan of trusting human nature and our ability to do the proverbial right thing
Hmm.
unless there is a framework of what is right and why that thing is right. um, I wouldn't trust myself that I will do the right thing if left completely unchecked and unsupervised,
Hmm.
and I wouldn't trust anyone else. So all these centuries and all these things that have happened and all the information we have accumulated, bringing us to what we call the modern civilization, is essentially a way to not be the exact same people as Ice Age people, but also not an evolved species that has outgrown some tendencies.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, that knowledge accumulated over time from the experiences of past generations is only useful if we can use it within the context of a framework, right? Um,
More or less. I mean, perhaps you could say, are you the exact same person that you were, I don't know, 10 years ago, or when you were 5 or 10 or 15 years old? Probably not. Hopefully not. But at the same time, you're not really another human being.
hmm.
So these are layers of experiences, of information. If you take it down to its most granular level, it's just data upon data that you're processing, and this adds more dimensions to the skills and abilities that you have as a person to cope with the world, with yourself, with other people, everything. So something that could be extremely stressful, for example, when you were, let's say, a teenager, typical time in human life to be super stressed and super angsty, you know, it might not really be all that challenging, As you grow older, you might go like, yeah, okay, I know how to do that. I've done it before. Yeah. You know what to do because you've done it before. You've seen other people handle similar situations and what they do. So now you have a lot of data and a lot of layers of information. So, yeah, they're like, oh yeah, I can do that.
Hmm. We also have access to, nowadays at least, infinite reservoirs of information, of data.
Yeah.
Um, so that is one key difference from where we were 10,000 years ago, where if we wanted to send a text message, it would be through smoke signal or something like that, right? Or cave paintings.
Exactly, yes. And even more so, the thing with um, the World Wide Web and AI, it's that it's sort of removing um, any kind of obstacle that our ancestors would have when it comes to acquiring information and having to make, let's say, the correct connections for that. Like, you don't really need to know the correct people just to get good information, like good quality information about a subject that you're interested in or something that's troubling you and you're looking for assistance. Like, let's take something not psychologically or emotionally charged. Let's say you want to build a chair. You don't really need to bother finding someone in your more or less immediate circle who can build good chairs. You can find, I'm talking about the situation you want to build the chair on your own. You can just find a lot of information, YouTube tutorials, without bothering with making this kind of connections. And even though um, I think there might be situations this is not a good thing, at the same time, it's not an entirely bad thing because, like there's not any particular norm that decides who gets access to what. It's like if you want to look for it, you can go look for it. It's there. Just go get it.
Hmm. How do you see advancements in technology impacting behavioral patterns or trends in people?
Um, it depends, like what we are talking about. How would you like to frame that question?
Well, the facility of transferring communication, before you had to pay per minute to talk to somebody on a big bulky phone. Then, phones got smaller. You could text, you could call, you can email. Now we have the internet. There's asynchronous reservoirs of knowledge, video format that you can tap into for anything that you need. How are you seeing that advancement of communication technology impact the development of trends of people?
I would like to stay optimistic and not just hope, but to the extent that I can, um, work or at least help towards the direction of the kind of like positive technological future where we have access to um, new tools that can make our lives better. I mean, what we said before, like with that Netflix show, Love, Death, and Robots, I am very keen on the idea of having an AI robot to clean the house, especially if you think about it like in the context of people who are perhaps of older age. Um, Not murderous AI robots. uh, but how exactly we're gonna get to a place that all these technologies will work for the benefit of humanity and human societies, that's a very difficult question to ask. I do think and hope and want to have this kind of hyper evolved technological options available for everyone.
What do you consider as a baseline literacy, air quotes, on what we should know to wield the technology responsibly?
Well, there is something I do think, for example, needs to change, and this is adding more computer science to the educational curriculum, like programming languages. At least, I mean, I know that these things can happen now pretty much automatically with like ChatGPT and all the different AIs out there, but I still think that having an understanding of how machines um, quote unquote think is a useful skill to start developing. I do believe in humanistic and social sciences, not the way that they are currently developing, which is a little bit too metaphysical for my taste, and if not metaphysical, then very literary. But perhaps they could go back to how they were when I was a student, that they were more scientific,
Hmm.
a little less fun fiction, perhaps. Um, yeah, I mean, some things are. Um, Math and philosophy are important because apart from evaluating whether someone has solved an equation or not, it's also a good way to actually train the human brain to think efficiently and effectively. Okay, you don't have to become the super amazing theoretical mathematician, um, or the most influential philosopher, but these are two disciplines that can help people learn how to think.
Standing on the shoulder of giants, as they say, right?
Um, yeah, I mean, I do believe education is really very important. I do think that it needs to start changing to adapt and adjust to modern times, but not the way I have seen in various discussions online, and not only online, to make it something like, 5 years of your life where you just pick up a few skills just to get a job done.
Mm.
I think that's a very dystopian idea. And it's kind of like saying to people, okay, go and work in a big factory where your role will basically be performing some repetitive menial tasks.
Yeah, I don't think that lends well to a resilient society.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big problem if people can only learn how to do like five
Specialized,
things.
specialized repetitive tasks.
Yeah, I mean, this is a case where you just have a production line that's run by machines, and you have humans come in and they go like, oh, okay, I need to press that button here just to make sure that something happens or doesn't happen. I don't i don't mean this in like a derogatory way for people who are working in factories, but what I'm saying is you can't build a society that is entirely a huge production line and people are only factory workers with just, I don't know, perhaps a select few
Well,
who have some great ideas.
mhm. I think what you're saying is not that it's a bad thing to be working in a factory. I'm sure that they didn't choose to be working in a factory. If they had other choices, they would probably default to something that was a little bit more creative, more expressive, more fulfilling. Um, but yeah, I agree 100% with you that there should be a means of applying ourselves more holistically in the context of society and not just focus on cultivating skills and knowledge and experience around how do we feed a machine, a capitalistic system that just is to produce and consume, right?
Yes, and just to avoid perhaps triggering anyone, I don't think that by default a communist system can treat
Oh,
people better.
they can't
Yeah,
agree. I'm not
because
advocating for communism either. I'm just saying there's
yeah,
more to life than just producing and consuming. Yeah,
an
not communism.
education should be something that at least gives people a first opportunity in life, um, to see the world in a more holistic way, as you said. And then, like if the only thing you want to do or can do or decide to do is this repetitive task, please, by all means.
But there should be a choice. There should be a choice um in the way that you can pick how to live your life. Before that,
Yeah.
in the educational system, you should be exposed to a broad range of different things. I should know how to make my own bread and grow tomatoes and um play an instrument and paint in some fashion or at least understand color theory. Um understand poetry. I think people need all that
Yeah,
before they go and
for
choose, I'm going to work 40 years in a factory, or I'm going to
yeah,
be a
like
doctor.
for learn math, learn statistics,
Mhm,
learn computer science, because I would have liked computer science to be a bigger part of my education as a child and a teenager, and it wasn't. And now I am like, oh, okay, that's a really bad idea. People need to learn about data and databases and things like that. They are a huge part of our lives. I mean, don't aim to be, at this point in your life. I don't know if you need necessarily to become the very best, but
mhm,
expose people to all these things. Um, let them see all that. And if they become like a factory worker, okay, that's it. But not because, like they were born to be a factory worker, therefore that's the only thing I'm gonna teach them. And
mhm.
if they become that, give them more opportunities down the road, because maybe they'll do that for a few years and realize that they want more and they can pursue more.
Mhm.
I don't like systems that like to trap people for no real reason. There has to be some kind of mobility, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure we all can empathize that there needs to be some form of evolution in our lives for us to be wholly fulfilled, because we're not a static brick of earth. We are like warm clay, and we shape ourselves according to the forces of our lives and the feelings inside of our bodies and minds. So we need to be in an environment that is also accommodating and flexible to let us
Yeah,
explore those expressions, right?
yeah. I mean, my grandfather was born in Greek island, Paros, and his family was, when I'm telling you dirt poor, I mean that. Okay.
Hmm.
And this man joined the Navy at a very, very young age, like barely legal. Okay. Uh, and I mean the Navy, like the, the military stuff.
Hmm.
He got his training and early education through there. He traveled actually from Greece to United States, and I think crossed definitely the Atlantic. I'm not sure if the Pacific as well. Um, he came back, went to something like, let's say, community college, and he had this afternoon night classes in order to get his law degree, and then joined the police force, and he became like what the word, like a director. I'm not sure how the word needs to be translated in English right now. um, and build himself up from there, because obviously, as you can understand, this process and progress materialized in him improving his financial condition, starting a family, raising his daughter, supporting a lot of people. Like, at least for me, this has been a very important and influential person in my life. Um, and the way I see the world, like, you can't force people to be like dirt poor just because they were born this way
Mm.
and their families were barely educated. I mean, uneducated, if I have to say,
Well, by that
if I
point,
have to be
it's
honest.
but by letting that sort of unfold and stay in that environment with no support of some kind, it's indirect exploitation, right? At some point. Um,
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying that you need to turn people into victims and go like, "Oh, you poor you have
no, no,
going
no.
to
But
help yourself."
I'm
Like
saying, if
give them the power to
yes,
take charge of their lives.
yes, that's what I'm talking about. Empowerment. I'm not talking about pity. But
Yeah,
yeah, we should all be able to wield knowledge and be able to become champions and heroes in our own Greek mythology,
in
um
our own lives. I
Odyssey.
mean, you don't. Yeah, you don't have to save the world.
No, but you need to save yourself and
Yeah,
whatever that entails, and whatever hydras you need to chop the heads off. We all need to encounter our own hero's journey, is what I'm saying.
yeah, exactly. I agree.
Okay. Well, Evangelia, do you have any piece of advice for somebody who I guess this conversation just organically converted into some sort of positive mental attitude and just, exploring the human side of technology and where we are and where we want to go and ideally what we want to see in the world.